To my survivors, to my uprisers, yet to my savages banging on the colonizer. We the survivors, we the uprisers, yeah, we them savages banging on the colonizer. Yeah, we them savages banging on the colonizer.
We got that mural because students organized to say we don't like how we're being represented in this picture of the super taco picture, which is in the library. And so we need something that represents us. Now, this was mostly Chicano Latinos, but then also thinking about like, wait, nobody else is represented. Let's bring it up to everybody. And I think this mural came about because of that organizing, but also as a symbolism. It's like we feel that we're being changed. We feel that we're being, colonized in a system that we're getting less for. And so if education is about thinking and critically thinking and decolonizing our mind, then we need to make the space for that. And we can't be punished for thinking.
Okay.
Good?
Yeah, great.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alicia Flores. This is my 4th year at HSU, and I'm directing this piece titled Students Promoting Institutional Equity.
My name is Jacqueline Espinoza. I'm a forestry major. This is my 3rd year, and I'm a cinematographer for this film.
I'm Kevin Rigg. I'm a history major, and this is my 3rd year at HSU, and I'm the cinematographer for this wonderful production.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Rojas. I am a criminology and justice major. I am a 3rd year, and I am the sound recordist for Students Promoting Institutional Equity.
My name is Melinda Wiley. I'm a communication major with a minor in social advocacy, and for this film I am the producer and first assistant director.
Humboldt State University was established as an institution of higher education on illegally occupied Wiyot land. Humboldt County has 18 federally recognized tribes, but HSU has had less than 1% Native enrollment. Instead of serving the local population, HSU recruits minority students from out of the area to serve its financial and diversity needs.
Is because of the lack of role models, many of the Chicano Latinos will come to your office to get validation, validate their experience, validate that they belong here, and they do, and validate that they're not crazy because of the microaggressions that they might be experiencing in campus.
Cultural taxation is the situation where you have a lot of faculty of color on campus, the few of us, and then the students usually attracted to you because you kind of match their experience, so they come and see you and they want to ask you questions, or when you go present they want they need help. And I think as part of coming up at the university, you realize that there are other people that help you, so it's your job also to help others, right? It's not like you're going to ask them, oh, are you a social major? If you're not, I can help you. Yeah. So that happens a lot, from people wanting to talk to you and share their experience and their frustration, to students who just want you to be their advisor for the club and organization. And then you have the administration also, who wants to pull you into committees or projects because you're the person that can provide expertise. So if you sum up all of that, that's what we call cultural taxation, and that's something that usually happens naturally, but at the same time not everybody has to provide that cultural tax, right? So you have a lot of folk who don't have to have that kind of a service to students, but because we are who we are, we usually provide it.
Puerto Ricans are, of indigenous, Boricua, Taino, and African and European Spanish descent, but you're never able to actually fully connect with the indigenous side. And so until I came up here and I was able to see that, it's a valid identity and it's not this extinct identity or culture that they speak of. There's people here alive, and it kind of just to say to me, like, you know what, I'm part of that. I'm not extinct. I'm here right now, and so there's no way they can say that the Tainos and Boricuas are extinct when I'm here and these people are here and they're still holding on to their culture and just as we are. And so with that understanding, in my major of environmental policy, I came into constant conflicts with my professors because they were always trying to affirm the status quo by saying, no, whenever we write papers that would talk about Puerto Rico, that's my interest. So they would say, no, Puerto Rico's a territory. You must validate the territorial government on there. And I'm like, no, I would not validate a colonial government. I'm going to tell you what I have learned and from what my history has told me and from the history that I've looked up and dug up has shown me. And my perspective was not validated.
I think that's what we experience violence when we're not validated, when our knowledge base is not validated, when our ancestral knowledge base is not validated, we experience violence. Violence to our souls and who we are, right? Every community has ancestral knowledge and knowledge that must be taught.
On the one hand, I think it's positive because I think the students are demanding a better education and a better investment in their experience in the university. But at the same time, it also has created a lot of animosity from professors who don't want to change and who feel that, well, this is the way I teach, and if students like it or not, that's the way I'm going to do it. And I have heard about very racist projects that students do, one in particular in history, related to pretending to be colonizers. That was pretty shocking to hear that, project where students have to pretend they are colonizers and they create a colony and pretending, what are some of the tactics that they're going to use. So this is Humboldt 2016. This is not 1950s, 1930s. This is something that students have to do in class. So as you can tell, obviously there are the extreme cases, but that's kind of an example of the kind of a overt situation. The covert stuff is more microaggressions of students not feeling the classes engaging, or the professors going to a particular group versus others. And I think that's very challenging because the students are looking for the opportunity to learn and apply the learning and apply critical thinking skills, and then you find classrooms that you can feel the tension that some professors are not really well prepared to being able to balance the different points of view with the students, and then either students shut down and realize, well, I'm not going to even talk about any particular issue that might be controversial because then other students are going to roll their eyes, or they're going to look at me in a strange way, so they censor themselves, or they get in situations where they get really out of hand and people become confrontational. So that's the other piece that it could potentially happen when you start putting the students from different experiences together, and then you have faculty who've been teaching the same way for the past 20 years, and now they're challenged to accommodate students who have different experiences and challenging them on how to better teach the material.
The fact that HSU is classified a Hispanic serving institution enables state funding. However, that funding has not been used to address the lack of faculty-to-student representation. Because of the lack of representation and understanding between faculty and students, the learning environment can be hostile when thinking critically about colonization on this land.
Well, institutional equity would mean that the system has to change, right? So right now, what we see is in the CSU, so let's just take the CSU as an example. So in the CSU, we have 23 campuses. The number of people of color has increased. So the majority of students in the CSU are students of color, almost 70%. So what has that meant? It has meant a divestment. We spend less on each of you, each of the students. We have larger class sizes than we did. So before, when I came to the CSU, I graduated from San Francisco State. I got my credentials from San Francisco State. And San Francisco State, they would say, don't go to the UCs, go to State, because State has smaller class sizes, more interaction with your professor. Is that true today? There's less time for us to have with each student today. So I believed in the CSU, but in the 80s, when the majority of campus was more white, we spent $11,000 in each student. Today we spend $6,000 something. But if you take into account inflation, today we shouldn't be spending $11,000. We should be spending more. We should be spending almost $24,000 for each student, and we don't do that. So where are our priorities? We need to get our priority state because everybody's suffering. Now, the state of California is majority students of color. So, of course, CSU should be majority students of color. But then even in the K through 12, there's divestment. We rather spend money testing students, 600 million, rather than giving them a holistic education. Stop testing the students, stop controlling. Let's stop the control policies. Let's look at how does a student learn?
This week I was reviewing files for students' awards, and in the committee, the final committee who voted, there were there were 12 people, but 2 who were people of color, and there were about 50-50 people of color, students of color, and white students. But that really tells you who's making the decision. Even though you've seen in the whiteboard reflected the diversity of the students, the people who make a decision about in this case given awards is continue to be the majority white, and that's very problematic. And I guess I can relay that to the whole metaphor of the Oscar, right? So you have all this workforce of actors of color doing a lot of the hard labor, but yet who gets to select and who gets to be nominated are white. So that's very frustrating. And to that meeting I said, I think we need to take in consideration that some departments are more diverse than others, and some of the students who are kind of making it to this level of being recognized for awards have done it with a lot of challenges, right? So maybe they don't have the same opportunities as other students, they don't get handpicked by others, they don't get as easy access to the mentorship that others have. So yeah, it's easy to see that how some students publish and go in international conferences, but at the same time, do the students, start at the same place? And the answer is obviously no. And I think, people were shocked that I say something like that, but and I think one of the issues that I find a lot, and I don't think I have to explain, is the whole issue that we don't want a special preference or a special treatment. We want to be able to have the same opportunities. But when you start, below the same level, then that means you have to catch up, and then you have to do that push. And to me, I see it a lot, and sometimes we miss that because we think, oh, you make it to university, so you're it. But that's not the case. We know that a lot of students have to become a lot of challenges before they get to the same level of others. And when you have a university like this one that is very fragmented in the supports, it's even more challenging.
Instead of being a space that fosters critical thinking, the California State University system corrals the students into the assembly line of upward mobility.
How it feel knowing we're the very last survivors of a once wild world, and the ruling class don't want us around as reminders. We are evidence of the casual killings studied on Plymouth Rock, the genocide sparked by the thieving vile pilgrims. Any warriors out there listening, we need you if you're able. We need you to be willing. We defending our people, no more playing the victim.
Why do you think that institutional memory is important and its relevance?
Well, I'm a historian, of course I think it's important. I don't believe that we can understand anything that's going on in the world today without historical understanding, without some sort of institutional memory. If we look at Vietnam, okay, one of the reasons the Vietnam War ended when it did at long last was because of student protest. Because the campuses across the country were erupting in protest, and there was nothing anybody could do about it, other than shoot 4 white kids and shoot 2 African American kids. And the cameras didn't cover, of course, the African American deaths. They only covered the 4 white deaths at Kent State. The 4 deaths in Mississippi went uncovered. So my feeling is that students have to have a grievance, and that was pretty easy. They didn't want to go fight a war that they thought was unethical. But now that we have a volunteer army, students who don't want to go to war don't have to, even though it is still the Army, all services are upward mobility for people of color, largely. It's a way out of a situation for many. They can't get into college. They don't want to go to prison. And by the way, when you look at those statistics of the divestiture of California in particular monies and compare it with the investment in the prison industrial complex, it's shocking, and I'm sure you've seen those statistics, because we spend more money to keep somebody in prison every year than we do to send people to college.
We leave every 4 years or however long it takes you to finish your degree, and so they pretty much bank and rely on institutional memory and institutional knowledge to be erased from the student memory. And so when students in the previous generations fought for something, then the next, generation, they could take it out because no one there remembers that that was even there or that people fought for that to happen or whatnot. You can beg and beg and beg all you want for these institutions to give you what you need, but really they're not going to have the best interest at heart for you. It's just more about how they can exploit you and take money from you and make money off of you. And just so that you can, go back to the system and go get a job and make money for somebody else. And so certain resources that are not provided, sometimes you're just going to have to take it upon yourself to take the initiative to create those resources or provide those resources for your community.
Cause the sacred sounds of dignity are ours to keep. The sacred sounds of dignity are ours to teach. The sacred sounds of dignity are ours to keep. The sacred sounds of dignity are ours to teach. The sacred sounds of dignity are ours to keep. The sacred sounds of dignity are ours to teach. Won't take this shit no more. Won't take this shit no more. Won't take this shit no more. No more. No more. No, never begin. Never begin. No more will we live off of the toxic legal rations. My people got the fire and the tactical actions. Been plotting and we're planning cause we gotta see a change. And we can't wait for it tomorrow, no, we need it today.
The Native American Studies program, tell me, are we a sustainable school? We claim sustainability. Who has been sustaining these lands for the past 1,000 years? To make these big words like access to student excellence, we talk about the retention and inclusive student service centers. But the people who are actually doing the work, the people who are actually supporting students of color are not respected here. The only thing that's been respected is the people making decisions behind our back. Making decisions without the consultation or the consent of their students and their faculty, staff, and administrators. And we are tired of it.
Sir, can you tell me personally why you were at the protests during Indigenous Peoples Week?
I think it's extremely important for faculty, for anybody with a conscience, to protest what I would regard as the wrongful termination of Dr. Jacqueline Bowman.
Why would you say it's wrongful?
I feel like all she did was report the truth about the faculty and staff being severely underrepresented among our employees here at Humboldt State in comparison to the percentage that underrepresented minorities make up of students within the student body. Our student body is 29% underrepresented minority, and she reported at the Stokes Fund that it was 12%, which is the truth, and I think she was fired directly because of that.
So how do you feel about the manner in which she was removed?
I think it's ghastly that the university would roll in with 3 highly paid administrators to her office and tell everybody to get out, and to disrupt a student in the middle of taking an online exam. Had to time out and leave, and after everybody left the building, to bring in locksmiths to change the locks. To me, I see that as, I know that corporate America probably feels like that's decisive and that's how we do business, but to me, it was very inhumane and grossly disrespectful, not only to Jacqueline Bowman, but also to all the students and staff and faculty at Humboldt State, where I think we should be able to be more civil and be better about how we do that, if it has to be done.
Does this issue have context in the bigger picture of our country? Is this, the way I see it, is almost like a microcosm?
Yeah, I think Jacqueline's firing is a microcosm of what happens on many American university campuses, including the CSU. I'm aware of many situations like this on CSU campuses in the last 10 years. And it's part of the, for example, Vine Deloria Jr., the great Lakota scholar, said in one of his books that, a Native American could be a doctor, an attorney, enter a lot of professions, but when they become a professor, although Jacqueline was not a professor per se, but a highly valued mentor here for so many Native American students at Humboldt, that you really can't rise too high in the structure because of so many institutional barriers about people being reluctant, the institution being reluctant to fully acknowledge or value or accept the indigenous wisdom. And Jacqueline is one more human being from a tribal community, Lower Brule, who does personify and she carries well with beauty that aspect of indigenous knowledge that the university apparently is incapable of valuing because of this fire. And if they valued that kind of knowledge and that kind of heart and that kind of fidelity, truthfulness, and commitment that she has shown for 9 years, they couldn't possibly fire a person like that.
You know, my solid position is that, first of all, Dr. Bolma should not have been fired in the first place, and secondly, she should be rehired. That's my position. She should be rehired. If she's not rehired, the students will remember.
Struggle to risk the philosophical purist in any argument. You will always be the surest, furious when we dare to disagree. Though you lack basic knowledge of our true history. Coward, you sick, your whack is contagious. You got the key if they ever could cages. Claim warrior, but you so scared to die. Feeding for fame while we occupied. These accusations you'll try to deny. You wanna call shots on this situation, but this don't concern you, this ain't your location. Stay in your lane and remember your place. I hold the power that cowards can't face. Keep posing for pictures to post on your page. Keep your soul and head down, say the fuck out my way. Fuck out my way, say the fuck out my way. I'm warning you now, for your sake, not mine. I'm holding ammo when God is divine. Treason and war, you've chosen your side. You found your home behind enemy lines.
Before the main protest on Tuesday, there some students held a smaller protest to burn the doctrine of discovery, the papal bulls, and I was wondering if that has any relevance to what's been going on. Is there some connection there? Or
You know, I think the connection with the students bringing out the truth about the legacy of the doctrine of discovery and how papal bulls were used. Pope Alexander issued 2 papal bulls when Columbus came back to Spain in 1493, saying that he was in effect giving the Western Hemisphere, or a gigantic chunk of it, to Spain. And I think that what that does is it highlights, the students doing that highlights or underscores the fallacy. To me, it's an endeavor to mythologize the theft of the Western Hemisphere. So, for example, the previous president here at Humboldt said that he once thanked the Wiyots for giving Humboldt State this ground that the university is located on. And Native Americans here locally were aghast by that comment because the Wiyots didn't give that ground. It was stolen. It was stolen at the end of the U.S.-Mexican War in 1847. It was stolen at the time of California statehood. There was never really any legitimate acknowledgement of the ownership of California Indians to all this 125 million acres of land that makes up California. So to me, the value of the power of the doctrine of discovery is that the timing was Indigenous Peoples Week. Native Americans, put it simply, they get disgusted with having to live with the lie that somehow the title of almost 2 billion acres of our lands was legitimately transferred to the United States or to Spain before that or to England before that, because many Native Americans know better that the doctrine of discovery is a lie and that we have to live with it, but that lie legitimates everything that is as far as property title here in the United States.
Just before that major protest on Tuesday after Jacqueline was fired, some students in a different protest chose to burn the papal bulls of the Doctrine of Discovery. Do you know anything about what significance that would have and any relation that would have to these events?
Would you say that again?
Some students on Columbus Day burned the papal bulls of the Doctrine of Discovery in protest. And do you see any relation to that? Or to the events that happen on campus?
Well, I know that week was Indigenous Peoples Week.
Right.
And I appreciate the issues associated with the celebration of Christopher Columbus in the context of our Native American community. So I know that there are linkages there.
Do you know anything about the Doctrine of Discovery?
Very little.
Okay. Do you believe that colonialism is still in effect?
I think it is in many parts of the world.
Do you believe it's still in effect on this campus?
My goal is to be able to say no.
That's not what I asked you.
I don't think so.
No? Okay. Okay. And this campus is still located on Wiyot land?
Yes, it is.
And yet, there's no colonialism present?
I don't know how to answer that question.
What about senti pensante? Senti pensante as another way of looking at things that we think and we feel. It's not only depositing things in the mind, it's also how we feel about them, how we experience them, how our communities are being destroyed. We are thinking beings and feeling beings. And so if we taught in that manner, maybe we wouldn't do the things that we do.
Who owns our history? Colonization is a written history, but decolonization is our history to write.
There's very select few students that go on and speak, and I'm always the one that feels like there has to be a voice because I found it. And like I said, Creator gave us a voice for a reason, and so we must use it. And so once you find yours and you have that conviction, no one can tell you what's wrong or right, because and especially when you're in a colonial setting, everyone's going to tell you you're wrong. It's no. If you know the history, you have that conviction, you stay with it, and you hold on to it. Because in this colonial system, look, in my education system, no one was validating me in my perspective, but you. And when you go on to the bigger world, you'll see that there's people out there just like you, and that have the same conviction, and that's where you'll get your validation from. You don't need it from these higher institutions, which, when you look at the history of it, come from the colonial structure that you yourself are up against. And so you don't need validation from that. All you need is it's receipt. It's receipt that tells you that you've passed the test and that you are qualified to work in their system. And so once you have that, that's where you're able to disseminate your information and your convictions onto others, because you have that receipt that says you are certified. And so by the colonial regime.
So on the note of local activism, as we mentioned, a lot of our inspiration definitely has come from examples that were set by the Black Panthers, the Chicano movement, the American Indian movement, the Young Lords, etc. There's so many other movements that you can call upon for great examples. And it's something beautiful that I recall from even just like the Unified organization was that the indigenous students took pieces of their culture and themselves and put it into their organizing as well. And so, it created an organization that was making community-based consensus decision-making, which I like to quote Marlon Sherman. He's a professor in the Native American Studies program, but he was just pretty much praising students for what we did, because according to him, we were doing things that many adults can't even get together and do anymore, which is just to get in a room, sit together, talk things out, and make a decision without getting violent or crazy on each other, or like getting frustrated with each other.
Humboldt SQUID came to mind, and we created SQUID, which stands for Students Questioning Institutional Discrimination. And so this came on its own. There's people from the student labor union. That was my inspiration in manifesting itself, but this was a group's inspiration manifesting itself, and that's what SQUID was. And so things are always going to change, and don't be scared of changing. You know, things are always going to change, and die and come back. And so similar to that, like Unified, when we did our 35-day residency and takeover, that prompted the biggest protest since the Vietnam era, the 70s, the Black Panthers, and when all that social revolution was happening. So that means we're going down the right direction on this campus. That means we are starting to revive that spirit, and it is here again. And I feel it. Students should be not reluctant or scared to face it, because, like I said, this is a microcosm. Our higher institution system, HSU, is a microcosm of our national level and of the global hierarchy that we live in today. So we must learn to navigate it. If you're paying thousands of dollars to get a job, to learn to this, but you don't know how to navigate the very system that your job's in. So you need to understand that this is how your job can one day be here. Politics tomorrow can say your job is indispensable, and boom, it's gone. So you must understand how these play and how you can put pressure to keep your job, or anything you want to change. You must understand how these systems work, because everything is political. And if you don't understand the politics, then you're just with the wind.
We need to intimately know the struggles of those who have managed to correct the course of history by exposing that the freedom in this country is forever limited by a badly disguised bigotry. We need those who give voice to the endless bitter battles, the limited choices of the poor, ignored and trampled, who advance the frantic masses that can barely dare to feel like they even deserve to breathe clean air. We need those who live their lives concerned and alert, willing to put in long hours of thankless hard work. Those who help us get some ends in a healthy sense, dodging the worst dirt done as a last resort. We need our comrades' stories to remain intact, cause our integrity's the first thing to come under attack. When the system detects that you have strong effects, it'll analyze a movement and carefully select on the leaders to discredit or adopt as their own. Take my message of rebellion to secure the safety of the throne.